Good morning all, and thank you for joining us today for People Matters in DDI webinar on 3 must-dos for developing leaders. We have the privilege of having with us Zachariah, Managing Director, DDI India. I am Ritu from People Matters and will take you through the agenda for today's webinar. This webinar helps us to explore how organizations are incorporating the 3 must-dos when developing leaders. 1. How to use competency models to align programs that derive strategy and culture. 2. How to prioritize implementation details that deliver most impact. 3. How to put into place lead and lag measures to sustain and improve results. A little about today's speaker. Anu heads the DDI operations in India, including sales, marketing, operations, and consulting. At DDI, Anu enables clients achieve their strategic business and human resource priorities through a highly consultative approach that leverages the best of a client's capabilities with DDI's proven talent management solutions and consulting support. Our partner for today's webinar for helping us this program absolutely possible is DDI India and our research partner, the Conference Board. DDI is one of the top talent management consultancies. DDI helps companies transform the way they hire, they promote, they develop their leaders and workforce. Their clients are Fortune 500 and multinationals doing businesses across vast areas of industry, from Berlin to Bangalore and anywhere in between. They serve clients from 2 DDI-owned or closely affiliated offices. We have saved time to ask questions at the end of the webinar session. For those watching the live webinar, you can submit your questions at any time during the presentation through the Q&A section. We will try to respond as many questions as time allows. We have a full exciting agenda for today's webinar. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Anu. Over to you, Anu.
Thank you, Ritu. Thank you for a very gracious introduction. Ritu, you made me ready?
Yes. You may start now.
Thank you. Can you just help me with a small glitch here? If you can just help me move on to the slide, the leadership forecast study.
Yes, I'll help you.
So while Ritu helps the technology of the webinar, firstly, thank you all. I can see that there are about 51 at least who've joined in on this call. I'm humbled by the fact that you've taken time out to join in on this webinar. And I would like, in the interest of everybody's time, to ensure that you get at least some insights that you can take back in your own roles, either as independent consultants or as talent management or leadership development or even HR specialists in the roles that you perform in business today. So thank you. Just to set the context for the discussion today, the topic 3 must-dos for leadership development or for developing leaders is, in my view, a topic that cannot be full justice to in an hour. So what we've tried to do in this time is really to distill the themes and then just few themes that would be relevant for a diverse audience in our discussion today. And these themes stem from the body of research that DDI has over 43 years, 45 years now of being in the talent management space globally. But more importantly, share with you some of the most current and late trend insight studies from our global leadership forecast survey that we've undertaken, our 7th largest survey in the world, as you see the numbers up on your screen. And through this data, rich research of trend data, we were able to dissect findings based on very diverse perspectives that leaders and HR professionals shared across 4 leader levels, across 48 countries, 32 major industry categories, also multinational local organizations as well. And this study really helped us shape some very powerful insights on what do organizations do differently to respond to the challenge of developing leadership. And we all know in our own experiences that organizations cannot retain high high-performing, talented employees without having active leaders who can manage, coach, develop, and inspire multi-generational, tech-savvy, globally dispersed teams as well. So let's find out what do some organizations do better and where do some organizations struggle. To set the context for our presentation, I've tried to, positions in three broad areas. If you look at love-hate relationships, weddings, and also the look, and the look, like my husband would tell me ever so often, is the look that I often give, just a grace that speaks 1,000 words in his view. And he calls that the soft skills in my style as well. Now, what do these three things have in common with leadership development? Or what do organizations have in common with, say, leadership? And these are really the three areas that we center our presentation on. So let's talk about the first one, which is love-hate relationships. Now, when it comes to love-hate relationships, I've lived all my life in Bombay. I've studied in Bombay. Now I live in a different city. I travel across different cities and work as well. And I must say that having been raised in Bombay and having been passionate about living in Mumbai, I tend to compare and contrast my experience in living in different cities against what I'm used to and what I've lived at Mumbai. And therefore I end up having, like some of you who've lived in cities like me, a love-hate relationship with cities that we now live in too. So what is this common with, let's say, competency models? And I'm sure on the call here are smiling, but competency models are what we as HR are very passionate and committed to craft, to shape, to develop in our own organizations. And a lot of you simply would have been involved in such an effort as well. Lots of work and lots of effort. And we are a believer that these well-constructed competency models can be very, very useful in hiring, in assessing, in identifying potential, and also in developing talent. But a question, when you speak the word of competencies with your business leaders, with your internal stakeholders, what does it really tell you? How does this framework, this thing, really resonate with leaders on the ground? And our experience has been that often leaders in organizations view this more as, HR jargon or HR speak. They really don't see the connect often with competencies or behaviors or with key indicators, no matter what word we use, with their own words. And I would like to call it really a very muddled, hot and sour jargon soup often leaders perceive a competency model to be. And therefore, the first biggest challenge that we often encounter in embedding development initiatives is often a very disconnected leadership development agenda, disconnected with the business language, disconnected with the leader's context, and disconnected often at times with the cultural context of an organization as well. And I'm wondering here that do you often encounter line leaders and managers who give you the same feedback? So a question, this is just a poll question to everybody on the call today for me to get a sense of where you are in this context with your own organization. The question here, I'll ask Ritu to open up for poll. Are your own leadership competencies aligned with your business strategies? It could be a yes. It could be a no. If for some of you who are guided, you could select kind of, maybe. And for some, if this sparks questions in your mind as to what does alignment mean or look like, do select option B. So let's leave the poll open a couple of seconds. One of the interesting findings that we had from our GLF survey was that one of the biggest barriers that leaders encounter, no matter what level they're in, to formal learning, is a very low relevance that they see of what they're experiencing in the development journey with their job or context in which that they operate. And this barrier is one of the most important barriers that we as HR and talent professionals would need to be mindful of and cognizant of. And therefore, we think that context in learning is absolutely critical. Have you ever been in my shoes where often leaders arrive at a leadership development session and ask, why am I here? Or some of them possibly even thinking, how is this connected with my world? Or Are they even thinking, let's get the session over and done with because I've got work to attend to and learning stops beyond the classroom? If that's the word in, then it's hugely important for us to recognize that this can be possibly one of the biggest barriers to learning. And therefore, how do we ensure that this barrier is addressed? One of the first must-dos for developing leaders, therefore, is can we in our effort, talent professionals, hardwire the skills that we expect leaders to develop or the skills that we expect leaders to acquire with their business needs? And we call it a DDM, alignment with the drivers of the business. Let me give you an example. There is a company, an organization that we're working with that has one of their critical leadership priorities being driving a culture of innovation. And that's what you see on the left-hand side of your screen. So a fundamental question we often would ask such organizations would be, while that's a great business priority or a cultural priority that you would expect leaders to deliver to, what are those attitudes or behaviors that you would like leaders, therefore, to develop, model, and embed in their own roles and in their culture too? And this conversation leads us to saying, therefore, if you want leaders who can drive a culture of innovation, you would want them personally or individually to bring to the table a very high agility and a change mindset. You would want such leaders to, not quote, but empower and inspire people to challenge boundaries, provide people the attitude and the freedom to do things and shape things they would like to. You would also want such leaders to not just ideate and innovate for innovation's sake, but also marry that with an attitude, discipline, or a culture of execution as well. Now, unless you bring these competencies or capabilities to the table, or unless leaders are developed in these areas, it is difficult or challenging to drive a culture of innovation. Having said that, if you are an L&D professional or a talent professional on call, you might also have experience that driving behavior development is not necessarily easy. It's uncomfortable for participants, program trainers, mentors, and bosses to expect that a workshop on execution will guarantee that there would be a needle moment on execution. And therefore, what holds some learners back or some leaders back from bringing the DNA to the vis-a-vis some leaders who might acquire and apply and embed a skill enough. And here is where I recognize that competencies cannot be seen from the level of behavior alone. It is equally important for us to also recognize some below the surface thoughts, feelings, assumptions, conditions, if you may, or hardwired personality characteristics, if you may, that might hold some back from developing skills and competencies to the right level. For example, while yes, you might want leaders to be change-oriented and empower more, the reality is that it might not be a hardwired quality that they bring to the table. They might inherently discover. They might inherently not be as open to change. They might bring a level of cautiousness to the table that prevents them from looking at, let's say, outside the box ideas, initiatives. They might inherently lack the drive or the ambition, or they might be so controlling that their controlling style might come in the way of true leadership empowerment. And then in our effort to develop leaders, are we only responding to competencies and behavior, or are we also providing room through that development experience to challenge leaders some of their inherent beliefs and assumptions? Because if we don't provide that stretch experience, if we truly don't create pain or discomfort, if we don't even recognize that this discomfort might be uncomfortable for leaders, and if our development effort does respond to some areas of discomfort, then I might truly not be preparing my leader to drive a culture of innovation. And therefore that's true must-do that I might want to emphasize on the call here. Can we please, as talent management professionals, hardwire skill business context and then recognize that not all skills can be easily developable through a cookie cutter or a one-size-fits-all approach. And therefore, can we approach development from the lens of the learner and approach development in a way that we blend together, learning experiences that create pain, challenge people's comfort zone, at the same time provide a very safe learning terrain for them to truly discover beliefs and attitudes in addition to learning new skills and behaviors as well. That's the first must for our level set. And in doing so, what we would then be doing is creating a leadership language across levels that's not disconnected with your business direction and strategy. Let's talk about wedding. When I got married several years ago, I might be disclosing a personal phone call here, but when I did get married about 15 years ago, I was a very hands-on planner myself. I wanted all the details to be right. I wanted the trappings and the event management to be done right, and I must admit it was quite an effort. It was an effort to get all the pieces to fall in place and all the moving parts to square together across stakeholders for me, which were my parents, my husband's parents, and my extended family. And what I mean, to draw on a metaphor here, is that pulling off an event cannot be looked at as an isolated experience alone. There are many moving parts that we have to juggle, embed, marry together to ensure that the results are that you're happy to see or that you envisioned it to be. And thinking about weddings and implementing leadership development programs. We often encounter clients who talk about, can you ensure that this program is cascaded at multiple levels in a way that helps build culture? We also talk to multinational clients that often ask us, what would be a best way to approach an implementation? Should we adapt to local needs? Should we translate to a local language? Or should we have a program that's designed at a corporate level that's cascaded across the globe to multiple centers in a unique configured design? We also have clients who ask pointed questions around, what is the right point of, congruence between a global and a local initiative, and within local, across multiple business units and levels as well. So in our leadership research, what we interestingly found was, firstly, among the organizations that we surveyed, 69% of organizations indicated that they plan to add office or facilities outside their home country. And therefore, this conversation around, alignment was more and more critical for them. And therefore, how do you find the right balance? Now, when we looked at organizations and the organizations who indeed managed to strike the right balance, what we found was that across many initiatives, you could take three primary approaches. You could have corporate take the primary control, or you could put decisions entirely in the hands of the local operations, or you could have a balance. And we found that across talent management initiatives, three things that are best when corporate loaded are leadership selection interventions, because you need to have very similar criteria to determine who to bring to the table, who to promote, and when. The second being senior level leadership development programs, because you would want senior leaders to be the voice and represent the vision and the goals of the corporation as a whole. The third, performance management, because you would need to set some baseline and common standard of evaluation as well, organization-wide. And that does not necessarily mean that local considerations are not factored in, but it just means that setting corporate vision and standard would become the highest priority across the broad interventions. However, we find when it comes to certain other interventions, such as mid-level frontline leadership development or even succession management, we find that these interventions are best addressed through a balanced approach, because here is where you would need to build in a lot more local and local cultural perspective as well. And therefore, we find that in such initiatives, it is important to carefully manage inconsistency or balance between global and local needs. And in such programs, we also find that representing the voice of the culture, or voice of the local audience, becomes hugely critical in ensuring that your program meets the needs that it was intended to. Remember the business context conversation we had just a while earlier. Let me give you an example. A global tech company that we worked with, that had business goals of driving revenue growth, customer loyalty, engagement, building in operational discipline. With such an organization, what we did was engage in a multi-year, development engagement. What it meant was design and key themes being driven out of corporate, but countries like India and China and Europe all contributing through a very core team, leadership development talent experts to the whole design mix. We also ensured that there was facilitate, onboarding, language customization, content configuration that was done across each of these regions to ensure that this program met both local and local needs. A quick response via your chat. Are you talent experts when you think through leadership development rollout? Are you keeping in mind, implementation conditions? Do you think through, how can you best position, pitch a brand and initiative? Who do you engage in your communication process? How much of buy-in do you proactively seek from your line managers and key business sponsors? How align your programs with other talent interventions? Are you looking at leadership development in isolation of multiple other people talent processes? Do you think through alignment considerations early enough? Do you build in accountability at all levels to ensure that sponsors play the role that they are expected to, trainers play the role that they're expected to, and do you build in enough room for high quality lead and lag measures that will help you measure implementation efficiency real time, that helps you make course corrects real time, that helps you configure and design content real time as well? What do you do well, and what, if any, would you like to do differently? Share some quick tips via your chat, and what, if you may, would you like to do over when it comes to managing implementation considerations? 20 seconds on chat. You can respond to the host and the presenter here, and I'll summarize some of your feedback to the larger group. We have which talk about stakeholder management and buy-in being a very critical step that we can suggest. We also have some that have come in through private responses as well, where high potential performers should enroll for LDP programs. Post-session learning should be considered after 3 months of training. Thank you. These are good pointers. And therefore, the question to all on this group is, am I truly being a master blender when I'm looking at not just design in isolation of implementation details? Am I investing in building all the implementation loops in a way that helps ensure success of an OD initiative? I have one person here who's saying accountability at all levels is extremely critical, and it's interesting that you bring in the topic of accountability. How do I encourage accountability across not just the learners, but also managers of learners as well, to ensure that learning is not just, an isolated event, but all constituents play a very, very critical role in your own ecosystem to promote learning transfer and learning application and learning acquisition accountability as well. So thank you, all of these great pointers that you've just shared. Let's talk about the look. What does the look in common with leadership development? One of the questions leaders through our research is, as leaders, where leaders be spending their time? And very often we also get asked a question, what does time look like for leaders on the ground? And consistently, what we hear leaders say and tell us is that 41% of their time is truly spent managing, and by managing I mean, performing administrative tasks, reviewing, conducting performance discussions, etc. 25% of their time is really spent interacting. And by interacting, we mean purely having high-quality, powerful conversations. And these conversations could be conversations with peers, team members, managers, customers, and more. We also ask leaders, how would you prefer, your time balance to be? And interestingly, we found that leaders felt that they would want to spend more time interacting. We also have what patients value, and we got a different mix of response altogether. Let me put all of this in perspective. So what you hear really leaders tell us is that they would want to spend more of their time interacting, with leaders. Because the more I spend interacting, the more I invest in building high-quality conversations, the more it readies me to manage people issues of coaching, people issues of performance, people issues of career conversations, and more. And we often find that while this is an interesting ask that leaders have, it is not meant that leaders are equipped to manage these interactions well enough. And here is some insights. And we find that leaders struggle with interactions. And this is not just frontline level, but it is across multiple levels. And therefore, our biggest learning, globally, no matter what organization we work with or culture, has been that building positive action skills, therefore, is hugely important, a skill gap for leaders. And this cannot just be done through a tell, but it has to be through a learning experience that also promotes reflection. Reflection, quality self-insight. And we find that leaders who invest in developing both the self-insight and the skills to guide good interactions contribute significantly to bottom-line impact business as well, because you then have leaders who are contributing very directly to high levels of engagement. You have leaders who are then contributing directly to managing employee performance, morale, aspirations, and productivity on the ground, which in turn is leading to really high-quality business impact on the ground as well. That's really the lesson around interacting. And therefore, the biggest question that we have for you on the audience, Paul, is what is the quality of interaction that you believe your leaders are having in your ecosystem? Are you hearing, your larger employee base coming back, sharing feedback, be it through an engagement survey, be it through a pulse conversation, be it through one-on-one feedbacks or town halls, that I wish my leader would spend more time with me. I wish my leader would have time set aside for discussions for me. I wish I set aside high quality, development dialogues with my team. What is the level of quality of interaction that your leaders are having? And more importantly, is it important? Is a lack of it, reflecting a poor performance across any critical people or business metric? And what, if any, would to do to drive a culture, a mindset of positive interaction skills? Quick feedback, please. The matter, what's holding us back, and if holding us back, what's the impact that we see in our business today? Very, very interesting insights. So I hear comments around how do we ensure that interactions are not transactional, that leaves a very dry impact in connecting with people. How do we ensure that interactions are planned in a way that it covers or touches multiple levels of employees and does not ensure that the leader feels disconnected? I've heard somebody say, yes, interactions matter, but the fear of losing control tends to hold people back. How do we compete for such skills? I'm also hearing, do leaders truly walk the talk, and do leaders end up opting in some interactions as well? And therefore, what you've called out is really what is drifted across most organizations. And therefore, we find that we end up coaching leaders one-on-one. We end up training leaders on a set of skills that most might think intuitive, is simple, is commonsensical, but it's those skills that we end up seeing time and again recurring as a development need across organizations. And these skills are interaction skills that help build people's esteem, that help empathize, ask questions, seek and dwell, encourage others' involvement, ensure that he proactively shares his own thoughts, feelings, and rationales. Fundamental intuitive skills like these that we find time and again recurring in our coaching and development conversations as well. And therefore, one area, or the third must-do for developing leaders, can we ensure that we don't deprioritize soft skills. We encourage through our leadership development efforts that leaders model some of these skills as well. So it's not enough to learn empathy and what is empathy. It's not enough to learn how do I use seeking skills, how do I use questioning skills, but can we as talent professionals also promote an environment where we give enough room for leaders to translate, transfer, and then demonstrate skills in their day-to-day interactions as well. So let's collectively shift the focus from telling people how to delegate. Instead, shift the focus to saying, well, tomorrow if you had to have a delegation discussion with somebody, how would you approach that conversation? And let's talk that through would be a gift for us to practice and promote going forward. So those three must-dos, if you for developing leaders, which brings us to the question around measurement. A question to these are critical. We spoke about relevance of learning to business context. The second, we talked about don't view leadership development as isolated events alone. Instead, think through implementation details, right down to the last mile of promoting accountability at multiple levels of the organization. The third we talked about was soft skills matter, and soft skills really contribute to hard impact. If these are the three big pillars that we should work on, a question to the group: are some of your existing measurement practices or metrics really geared towards measuring impact on these three must-dos? What do you measure today? What do you measure in your own environment that tells you your leadership development efforts are paying off? Quick response from the audience. What metrics do you tell you that these three must-dos are being followed, if at all? And if you don't have any metrics in place today, what would you recommend would you do differently going forward? 10 more seconds. All right. So I have at one some who've said that there are no clear metrics as now to measure these must-dos. At another level, I hear some who've said that you define results upfront. What results are we expecting from learners? I also said there seems to be a conscious blind eye approach to soft skills measurement. I'm also shares better growth to the individual and organizations as well, and great reflection points. I'm also hearing some pointers through the Q&A. Thank you, Ritu, for pointing that out. Just while I scan through the Q&A. All right. We've talked about 360 feedback scores, employee engagement, leadership effectiveness scores, need analysis and measuring needle movement, and on a more day-to-day level, measuring connect type of interactions and follow up on action points. Brilliant. Now, this is where it comes to the bigger question around measurement. And therefore, I'm not here really to script out what measurement metrics would work in most organizations, but what we see here that organizations who successfully embed, these learnings have metrics that define and co-created upfront. So we are increasingly working with organizations that agree with at the start of a development journey, what should those metrics look like? And the metric would be, I would like to see an enablement on our employee engagement scores. Or I would like to build a culture where we don't want dependence on DEI as an organization to cascade skills, but I would want my leader to go back and cascade these skills, and that could be a measure. I have increasingly organizations tell us that if leadership development is connected to business context, the percentage of now leaders who are ready to move into and transition into senior roles or transitical succession roles and deliver is a measure of success of development investments made. We also have organizations that say, finally, all development should contribute to hard business impact. So if I'm seeing needle movement around productivity, I'm hearing needlement around, the number of innovation projects or ideas that have taken off, then your leadership development efforts have really paid off. So truly, I completely resonate with anybody in this discussion who said, define those business impact results metrics up front. Having defined that result metric up front, then design your leadership development journey is possibly a bigger and a better, path to take for all of us in discussion today. So that's it from my open for questions through the chat or the Q&A route. And I will have some questions here while I quickly scan that. If there are any questions that come top of mind, please ping them in.
For such an engaging presentation session. So with this, now as you say, let's move to question and answer section. So our first question is from Sandeep Pandey. Sandeep is asking, what is the differentiation of corporate and local communication?
Ritu, sorry, would you mind repeating the question again?
Yeah, sure. Sandeep is asking, what is the differentiation of corporate and local communication among the employees and organizations?
The corporate and local communication. Sandeep, would Sandeep be able to clarify that a bit further? Mm-hmm. I think I'm not fully understood. When you say, what's the difference between corporate and local communication? Can Sandeep clarify that question further?
Yes, I'll need to do so. So meanwhile, let's move to our second question. In this, our one of participants is asking, while communication with all is good to have, how would it be put to practice given a startup environment on a driven organization? Can you just, would you like to share some thoughts on the same?
Yes. I think in a startup environment that we find that communication is more informal, and that works because what we find startup environment is the environment demanding a lot more dynamic, fast-paced work ethic. We find that such environments also demand frequent and short bursts of communication because your business context and your business direction is constantly evolving, which demands changes internally as well, and therefore more frequent, fast-paced communications get the larger aligned to those changes. We also find that in a startup environment where the teams are formed basis networks, initial teams are formed basis your own personal relationships, it's important to also keep that connect alive because it's that informality in your culture that drives engagement. And therefore, you'll find that there is often a tendency to rely on personal, one-on-one communication forums a lot more rather than scripted communication. So these are what we've seen work. But the bigger question to ask is, how sustainable would it be when your organization grows and manages scale? When you add more layers, when you add more employees, in your own environment, would making the show leaders then be challenging? And we often find that leaders who over-rely on informal, personal, one-on-one, direct, small group commissions for them to make the leap now to it being more formal, more structured, more systematic. This is not easy. So think about how to sustain effort without losing connect with employees on the ground as you manage scale.
Thank you for answering this one. Our next question is from Anupama. She wants to know what's the best way to identify development needs of leaders.
Anupama, particularly at mid and senior levels, we would find that the best way to identify needs would be through a far more objective and rigorous assessment process. Let's face leaders at that level have a proven track record of success. You have they are at that level after years of successful performance, demonstrated performance on the job, And if you're trying to assess needs at that level, then you would also have to set it for their performance and their experience and assess needs in a manner that you are not testing them for here and now, but you're testing their readiness for what is to come in future. And therefore, a more objective assessment process is the path to take. We often find organizations rely on measures such as 360 or psychometric instruments and so on. 360 instruments are also powerful. They can give good, powerful insights, provided it is administered in an environment where there is a high level of trust, where your culture promotes giving, sharing, and receiving high-quality feedback. In such an environment, a 360 instrument can give very rich insights for a leader as well. However, if your environment does not have some of these enabling factors, cultural factors of trust, openness, integrity in feedback, then I would be cautious using a 360 for a need assessment.
Our next question is from Shiv Kumar. Shiv is asking, in your study, do you see any critical differences in the leadership development requirements in India versus other countries?
We see a difference by culture as much as we see a difference by level. Okay? And we find that leadership development needs are different by, so what a frontline leader needs is skills that would help him be more and more effective in his frontline leadership role vis-a-vis a leader at a mid or senior level. And therefore, what our study measured was what skill growth is required by what level, and therefore provide recommendations to organizations to focus on those skills in a very, very targeted manner. So, for example, coding and developing skills is hugely relevant for frontline leaders, and therefore I'm ensuring that my development programs address that gap. Whereas as you go further and further up the hierarchy, you might find that leading, driving, initiating, instituting change might be more and more required at higher levels, and therefore are you targeting those needs specifically? So it's more level differences, Shiv, rather than it necessarily being country or the differences. Country or regional differences do come in again, if you were to marry in this context, then it's easily achievable, but it's not so much so to do with culture per se.
For answering this, our next question is from Sham. He wants to know, how do we define the goal for leaders based on competency? Could you repeat that again? How do you? Yeah, sure. How do we define the goal for leaders based on competency?
All right. That's a very interesting question. When we say goal leaders based on competencies, our role really there is, are your competency goals a good alignment or a reflection of what the business needs, what the role needs, and what an individual needs? We call it the business role self-alignment. Let me take an example. Let's say I, as an individual, would pick developable acumen as a competency development need for myself, right? My rationale that could be that building global skills will help me work in a multi-country or multicultural environment, and it might eventually help me possibly pursue a career outside India. And therefore, I pick global acumen, right? A question that I would ask such an individual or leader would be, while that's a great focus and that will help you meet your personal aspirational goals or growth goals, is that married what the business and the role needs as well? And here is where I question that individual, and I would ask, let's say, in order to meet this agenda, if one were to ask your organization, when is the earliest opportunity you might have or you might have to take on a global assignment or work on a project that demands global acumen skills? And if the manager and the organization were to turn around and say, well, it's interesting that he has picked that competency here, but I don't see that person, moving into a role outside India, or I don't see that person working on a global implementation. I don't see an immediate application opportunity, or I think the business needs that person doing what he or she is doing here and now for the next 2 years, which will not demand global acumen. In such, then that competency target in itself might not be the best target pick. So in a roundabout way, respond to your question, matching a competency to a goal is critical, provided there is a business role self-alignment. If it only serves one of those pillars, then the goal might not be well structured or thought through enough.
For answering this question, we are receiving many more questions for you. So our next question is from Nutan. She's saying, could you share some tips on what can be done to train ready now on seeing the bigger picture, seeing how instance can be utilized better?
Could you repeat the last part of your question, Ritu, again?
Yes. I will repeat the question for you. Some tips on what can be done to train ready now, seeing the bigger picture, seeing instance can be utilized better.
Ready now, seeing the big, and the last part, Ritu, sorry, there was an echo in the line.
Seeing the instinct can be utilized.
Sorry, Ritu, apologies for this, yeah. Let's type out the question.
Yes. I'll just share it with you.
Sure.
And I'm also reading out one more time. I'm trying my best. The last part is seeing how instincts can be utilized better.
Instincts can be utilized better. Wow. That's such an interesting question. When we say instinct, I'm making some assumptions here that instinct could mean gut or intuitive judgment. I'm hoping that was the intent of the question. How instinct or intuitive judgment be used better? We often encounter this question when it comes to, working with leaders or coaching leaders who rely on instinct vis-a-vis on structure, method, or data analysis, rigor to drive their thinking. Nutan, thank you for clarifying it. A simple belief, really, Nutan, is that instinct or intuitive judgment is a great lever, particularly when you have to make decisions on the ground. If intuitive judgment is born out of past experience, all right? Let me take a metaphor. You are making too many on the call today, so pardon me. I have learned driving, okay, but I am not very, very comfortable driving a car on very busy click roads. Now, if I have never driven a car, if I don't have experience in driving, I can sit beside an experienced person who knows driving, let's say my husband, and every time he is on the wheel, I might offer him unsolicited advice. I might say, well, watch out for the person next to you, or don't back up, don't back up the way you are, or navigate the traffic better. I might give all that unsolicited advice, but he might turn around and say, well, Anu, if you've not been in the position that I've been, or if you don't have as experience riding on busy roads, are you truly best placed to give me all that advice? As a metaphor, what I mean, therefore, in my intuitive judgment or point of view, or backed by experience. If it is backed by experience, definitely leverage that in your decision making. So how do we train leaders therefore? So Nutan, a simple technique that we often use here is to get leaders, managers, learners to reflect on their experiences. So I might go through a critical sales meeting, for example, and if I'm back out of that sales meeting and I debrief how my meeting went with my team members or with my coach or with my manager, and if any of them help me reflect on that experience and help me, reflect on what are some key learnings or insights that I got out of that experience. All these reflections then ultimately contribute to me sharpening my intuitive judgment on situations. It tells me next time I'm in a situation, what could I do better? And this learning or insight comes from my experience. So that's the way. If you marry learning with adequate opportunities for reflection, you can sharpen your judgment. Nutan, a quick check, since that question came from you, is that response meeting what you were looking for, or did you have any other, layer of question here? Thank you, Nutan. Thank you. Ritu, over to you.
Thanks, Anu. Our next question is from Sandeep. I'm sorry. Sandeep wants to know how to measure effectiveness of leadership training programs quantitatively.
Quantitatively.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you measure effectiveness of leadership development programs quantitatively?
Yeah.
Sandeep, very interesting question. And Sandeep, these questions we often encounter when we design and when we conduct ROI studies as well. So some of the simple measures that we introduce are what we call as checkpoints. So for example, you might run a program on delegations and follow it with a very pointed, let's say, survey or a feedback process with team members, where you detail out or list out very specific behaviors that leaders were trained in or taught in a delegation skills workshop, and you rate and rank demonstration or visible efficiency or consistency in the use of those skills and behaviors. That is a very clear quantitative measure. We also find, to an earlier question, if you define business impact measures upfront. So, for example, if you find metrics such as improvement in productivity indices, improvement in engagement scores, improvement in customer satisfaction ratings, and if all those metrics were defined upfront and your development programs were training on behaviors that would help move these metrics, those are quantitative measures as well. We also find more and more organizations expecting leaders and participants to translate skills that they learn to projects, on-the-job projects. Each of these projects, if they're constructed well, which means that you define the scope, the budget, the outcome expectations of the project. These outcome expectations could also have quantitative measures. So, for example, we were working with one organization that was driving cost optimization as an agenda. And we trained leaders on how do you sharpen business acumen skills. We also train leaders on, innovation technique. We train leaders project management skills. And all these skills they use ultimately to work on cost optimization projects. And each of the groups were given targets or metrics that, in the project that they were working on, they had to demonstrate savings of an X percentage or managing budget effectively or avoiding overruns on cost budgets by a certain percentage. And when they came and presented their projects, used some of the skills that they learned, those in itself, again, quantitative measures as well. Sandeep, I hope this responds broadly to your question.
Answering Sandeep's question. So now, keeping time in mind, I think the last question we will take from Anupama. She wants to know best tools to develop people's soft skills in senior leaders.
Best to develop people's soft skills in senior leaders.
More than to develop.
Okay. More than I would say, promote discovery, promote reflection, promote self-insight. And therefore, a well-constructed, learning experience for a leader to train them on softs would be, firstly, a facilitator-led interaction that helps them to know what those soft skills are, and if it is a skill gap issue, then you should start the 10%. follow it up with a lot of self-insights. And self-insights can come through either powerfully crafted instruments, self-insight instruments. It could also come with, you pair leaders with a coach who can observe and use these soft skills on the ground. And through that, have developed soft skills. Let me use an analogy or a metaphor. We've all heard of a blended learning through the 10-20-70, though our research will debate is that ratio myth or reality. Let's say if I'm learning, if I want to learn a new sport, if I want to learn golf, I never played that sport ever in my life. I have a choice to go to one of the golfing ranges. I have a choice to hit 100 shots at a driving range and hope that they'll hit the mark. But that might not be the best way to learn a skill if it's a skill gap issue. I might then use the 10% to say, can I pair myself with a coach who can stand with me, who can teach me what those clubs are, when do I use which one, who can observe and hold me how to, grip a club, how to, bend, how to use my arms, how to incline in my posture. I get all those skills from an expert. Then I move on to the 20, where I have him observe me at the driving range and give me real-time feedback as I hit a few shots. And then I move to 20, where I then go and practice on my own. But here I'm assuming it's a skill gap issue. So if it is a skill gap issue, start with the 10%. Train leader what those fundamental, foundational, high-quality skills are, and then balance and couple it with rich, high-quality feedback and self-insight.
Thanks for
the question.
Thanks for answering all these questions. So now, and with this question answer session, we are going to wrap up today's webinar. Once again, we thank today's webinar partner, DTI, and our research partner, the Conference Board. Finally, our very special thanks to Anu, our today's speaker for the webinar, for her time and invaluable information that she had shared with us today. And I would like to thank everybody in our webinar audience for participating in today's presentation session. We will come back to you with many more. That concludes today's webcast. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, Ritu. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.